Hi there, my name's Andy Young and I'm one of the automotive lecturers down at Unitec in Auckland, New Zealand, and welcome to my Andy Mechanic YouTube channel. Now, on this particular video we've got a 1992 Toyota MR2 has come into the workshop, and there was a knock. It's failed the warrants of fitness, and there was a knock at the top of the front left strut. Now, at the top of the strut on the front, not only do we have like a metallastic bush, because the strut has to turn, we also have a bearing. Now, I can't for 1 minute imagine that this huge metallastic bush is all collapsed and the whole thing's flapping around. What I think's happened is the bearing has given up. It's got a bit notchy over time. These things get really neglected. And they are often sources of play, movement on the front wheel. When you grab hold of the wheel, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock and give it a wobble, you can feel a bit of a knock. And yeah, they often get overlooked, and people drive around for years and years and years, with a knock on the front suspension, and the mechanics check all the bottom bushes and stuff. No, we can't find anything, there's no movement, there's no play. It turns out it's the top of the strut. The top strut mount that's got some kind of play, whether it's the bearing or whether it's the actual metallastic, the rubber part that's failed. Or maybe the bolts have just come loose, who knows. So on this particular MR2 we're going to have to jack up the front left hand side, take the front left hand wheel off, remove the entire strut unit from the vehicle. That's going to involve undoing the bottom two bolts and these four bolts here that hold it to the vehicle. Get the strut into the workshop, use some spring compressors to take the tension off the spring, undo the top nut, and then we can remove this off the strut. Put the replacement one on, and this isn't new, this is a second-hand one. And it's taken me quite some time to find a part for this vehicle. Obviously I was trying to find a new component, and there were no suppliers in New Zealand that I contacted, at least. There were quite a few that I called and sent emails out to, that had these particular bushes, these particular strut mounts, on back order for over a year. That's pretty bad. So I was very, very fortunate to find a second-hand one. And it was only by pulling a few strings through my ex-students that now work in the part industry here in New Zealand that I was able to obtain one. Parts black market, you could call that, couldn't you? Okay, so once we compress that spring, we'll swap over the mount, and then we can put the unit back into the vehicle. Now, one thing to bear in mind with this is it's by undoing the strut and taking it out of the vehicle, undoing those two bottom bolts, the big bolts, it's going to affect the camber setting on the car. And strictly speaking, the vehicle should have a new wheel alignment once this job is done. Probably won't get one, but it should have one. Maybe when I'm teaching wheel alignments again I'll do it, but yeah, that's the plan. So let's head outside while it's not raining too hard and get that strut taken out of the vehicle. Ooh, brakes are down. Oh yeah. Now, with the wheel off, you can see that the strut's quite damp. Now that might be down to leaking oil from the seal just up here between the piston rod and the main body of the shock absorber part of the strut. If it was, then the spring itself would most likely be dry, but the whole thing's wet. So I think it's just been driven through some water. But we'll check everything, and we'll check this bush as well when we have the strut out on the bench. Now, to get the strut out, we've got to remove the E-clip for the brake pipe. Hopefully we've got... oh crap, we're going to take the brake pipe off the caliper. Fantastic, well done Toyota. We've also got the anti-roll bar link to remove from the strut, which is back here. It's probably a 14mm spanner size. I've got these two large bolts down at the bottom of the strut. They need to be undone. And at the top, onto the inner wing, there's four what look like 13mm nuts. And then we can take it out and have a look at it. Let's get this off first. This is the anti-roll bar link. Hopefully, oh, there we go. It's going to undo nicely for us and not spin, which they normally spin, and then you're having to try to hold the bolt part of the rose joint, or the ball joint. He says. I think that's what's happening actually. Maybe we can just hold it some pliers. It doesn't seem too tight. There we go. Excellent. Oh, don't forget the washer. Right. Okay, so the next job is to remove this E-clip here off the actual brake hose. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to remove the flexi off the back of the caliper and thread it through this bracket, which is a bit of a pain because it means we've got to bleed the brakes. I hadn't really counted on that. Oh, nearly. There we go. Now, at least that's free. Normally there's a little cut in there so you can pull them through and remove the flexi. This one is going to have to be pulled through the hole. So we're going to have to clamp it off and draw it through. Damn. Okay, now I can't clamp it obviously on this side of the bracket because I've got to pull the pipe through the little clip there, look, the bracket. And when you clamp these flexis, you want to clamp them as close as you can to the end, really, to minimise the fluid loss. So I'm going to have to clamp it up here somewhere. Not ideal. And we'll use the patented Andy hose clamp using a pair of mill grips and a couple of sockets. And be careful not to over tighten. You can damage these pipes if you're not careful. Now, unfortunately, given the location of where the flexi goes, the caliper is going to pretty much dump all its fluid on the ground. So I think it's time for a tray. Now you'll notice on here we've got some copper washers either side of the banjo fitting. Those do need to be replaced. You can't reuse those. We'll leave everything on there for now. Oh no, we can't. It's got to come off, hasn't it? Damn! So we'll take that off if we can without a screwdriver. Pliers. It is scrap anyway. There we go. Looks to me that this washer's pretty squashed. So it probably hasn't been replaced for some time. It's been done up and done up and done up. Yeah. Okay, let's draw that out of there. And now, all goes to plan, we should be able to pull that flexi pipe through that bracket. If not, we've got a bit of a puzzle on our hands. There we go. Perfect. Okay, now we can do the big stuff. So I'm going to pull the caliper off only because this is going to need new brake pads as well and it gets it out of the way. But you wouldn't normally need to do that just to remove the strut. Okay, that's spinning. And that's spinning. Right, 17mm spanner then. Oh, down comes the rain as well. What is going on? There we go. There's plenty of thread lock on there, that's a good sign. I can't remember whether I fitted pads to this or not last time. I've known this car now for, geez, about 5 years. So it's highly likely that I fitted pads to it in the past, which is most likely Yeah, it's red thread lock, which is the Loctite stuff. That's me. Okay, bottom one. Ooh, nearly dropped it in the oil. There we go. Great stuff. Okay, let's get the caliper out of the way. Then I can take the pads out and go get some new pads for it later on. Okay. Around the brake fluid. Excellent. Oakley dokley. Right, so let's get these pads out of the way. Otherwise they're all going to fall out everywhere. Oh, that clip's already come out, look. Okay. Uno. Dos. Wow. Look at that. Pretty much down to minimum. About 1.5 mil left on that one. Jeez. Less on that one. Okay, so now, with all that lot out of the way, we can now undo these large 19s. Okay. Jeez, that was tight. Okay, that's one. And the washer. Perfect. I always like to keep all my nuts and bolts nice and together. And again, I wonder if I've been in here before. Look, there's my thread lock again there, look. Maybe I have. That's right, we did a wheel bearing on it a couple of years ago. And that was on this side. Yeah, I remember now. So I'd have had the knuckle joint out to do that. And it's not had a wheel alignment since, so must have been okay. Ta-da! Okay, so that's the strut completely free down the bottom. All we've got left to do now is 4 bolts at the top. Okay, so these 4 bolts up here basically are the top strut mounting. So we need to undo those. Then we can withdraw the strut from the car. Okay, last one. There we go. Good stuff. Right. To the workshop. Okay, so not too big a job, and well, okay, we had to remove the caliper. We didn't have to remove it, but we had to remove the flexi pipe from the caliper, so now we've got some brakes to bleed. That's not always the case on cars. Obviously the MR2, it is. So we've got, the issue is a damp strut. And there was a knocking noise from the front. And we knew it was up near the top somewhere on the strut. Now, it could be, potentially, the bush. Now, between this piston rod here and the casing of the strut, is a bush, and that stops the piston rod moving from side to side and keeps it running up and down. There's also a seal, a hydraulic seal there as well, because obviously inside the shock absorber component of the strut we have hydraulic oil or hydraulic fluid. If that bush is worn, the seal won't, well, it'll be compromised basically. It won't be able to hold back all the oil, and some oil will be coming out with the strut. And running my finger down the actual chrome part, the piston rod, it does feel a bit oily. But whilst it's under tension, whilst the spring's on there, we can't really test it properly. We've got to get the spring off, and that's got to come off anyway to replace this top mount. So let's get the strut stripped down, and to do that you're going to need some spring compressors. No, we're not going to use zip ties, and yes, I've seen it done, and no, I'm not doing that. So these are spring compressors, and these are going to help us to put that spring under more tension, squash it down, hopefully, hasn't got many turns. And then we'll be able to undo the nut, top of the piston rod, with relative safety, hopefully. Okay, here goes. Now, first tip, when you're mounting these struts in the vise, whatever you do, don't clamp the cylindrical tube part, because if you distort that, you could cause some serious problems. So try and mount it on one of the plates down the bottom, the actual mounting bracket that goes to the knuckle joint. Try and trap that in the vise, and then you can tighten the vise up as much as you want, you won't cause any harm. Okay, one of the disadvantages of this particular strut is it doesn't really have very many coils. We've got basically 2 coils there, and this causes a bit of an issue with the old spring compressors, unfortunately. So when fitting your spring compressors, you've got to go basically between as many of the coils as you can. So all we can do really is get the coil compressor between those 2 there, look. And there's not many options on this one. And on a regular basis they look a bit dodgy. Some of the newer ones have got little clamps that go around the spring so they can't actually fly off. These are not those. Okay, that's that one in place. Right, now for this one. A bit more yet. Made by Repco. Probably do a bit of lube on them actually, they're a bit dry these. Now you've got to try and get these as much opposite each other as you possibly can. There is a limit on this particular spring. We're not quite opposite, but it's about as good as it's going to get. Okay. Now you can use a rattle gun on these. I'm actually a lot happier given the fact we don't have to really compress it very much. Just use a normal ratchet. And when you tighten these things up, try and do them evenly as well. It sort of reduces the risk even more. And they are quite dangerous. Pretty cheap to buy that. There we go. Excellent. Okay. You'll know when you've compressed it enough because everything will start to move around a bit. Now, before you take the whole thing out, it's a good idea just to mark up the position of the components relative to each other. A little bit of a wire brush. So get the spring. Yeah, then that's where it comes up at this side, isn't it? There we go. Okay. We'll just put a little line on there. Another line on the spring, and then the base of the spring onto the strut. There we go. So we know where it all goes later on. Excellent. So now that the spring is loose, we can now undo that centre nut. There it goes. Super job. Now, just remember, as we pull all this stuff off, this spring wants to explode and bounce around the workshop at any time. So just be careful of that. Okay. So we're going to just... That actually is seized on. Okay, time for a hammer. It could all go tragically wrong. Ta-da! Okay, so we can lift that and the spring off together. Excellent. Now this is what's left of the bump stop and the boot. That's all pretty much gone. And now, that's just the unit hitting the vise. I just want to check for play. Remember, this vehicle came in for a knocking noise, not necessarily just to replace this. There could be other problems as well, so we need to inspect everything. All looks reasonably good. I wouldn't say it was great, but it's, 24 years old. Assuming this is the original strut, that's pretty good going. Let's give it a bit of a clean off. Now, normally on the struts, you have an insulator around the bottom, a rubber boot that the spring goes on. This hasn't got one, so maybe it's missing it, because it does have the holes, the locating holes. That's not so good. Maybe somebody in the past took it off. Maybe they thought it would lower the vehicle, I don't know. Pretty sure that they're supposed to have them though. Really all cars do, otherwise you get lots of road noise. It's always a good idea to give the strut a really good clean up. And then you can inspect it for cracks and damage. Because don't forget, we're looking for noise. We're looking for something that's doing something it shouldn't be. So there's some kind of movement, something's giving and allowing movement, and it could be that, maybe the strut body itself is cracked. It may not necessarily be entirely down to the joint or to the mounting point. So you've got to give these things a good clean. It looks pretty good actually, but I'm just a bit concerned that there's no insulator. Well, it's genuine Toyota, so it probably is the original from new. Don't think it's leaking. It does feel more like water and dampness than it is actual oil residue, so that's really good news. Now, when you're checking the strut for operation, you need to be able to pull it all the way up and then push it all the way down, and you should get an equal resistance in each direction. So yes, it might be a lot harder to pull up than it is to push down, but it shouldn't change in resistance during being pulled out. You shouldn't get it to jump or suddenly miss, or suddenly jump all the way to the end of its travel, or get harder halfway up, It should maintain that resistance. When going down, it should be the same resistance, whatever that is. And of course on this one it's a lot harder to pull up. That's good. And you can also turn the piston rod and check that it's not bent. If it's bent, it's going to wobble around and not maintain its central position at the top. So that's good. You also want to check it for any kind of pitting and the chrome being damaged, anything that's going to cause that seal, the hydraulic seal under there, to fail. Now these units are not serviceable. I think this one you can actually take it apart, but you sure as hell can't get any bits for them. And modern struts nowadays are all sealed. They're a sealed unit. You can't go in there unless it's a performance strut, and then of course you can. But yeah, I'm just a bit concerned that there's no insulator. Maybe that's the knocking noise. I'll go and check, see if the other one's got one on. Let's have a look. So the answer says no. There's no, they obviously don't have insulators on them, or somebody's taken them out. Oh well. So that's the old mount that we've taken off. And yeah, okay, there's lots of wildlife and stuff in there, but the actual bearing itself, you can see that is really, really notchy. It's dry. You can probably hear that. It's not good. I think there is a bit of play in it as well, actually. Yes, it's knackered. Yeah. Not good at all. Okay, but the second-hand one we got, well, that's a bit better. It's nowhere near as notchy. Does it turn? It did turn the other day. Okay. Okay, well, it's all we've got, so it's going to go in. But what I did notice, inside there, I don't know if you guys can see or not, to be honest, but it's a bit hard. Oh, just. Can you see inside, looking backwards, inside there, there's what appears to be a crack. Now, what that is it's the metallastic rubber breaking its bond to the inner steel sleeve here, look. Now, the top's fine, no bother at all, all that's still intact. But down the bottom, we've got this sort of cracking going on. Now, I don't for 1 minute think it's particularly serious, because there's actually quite a large depth of contact where that rubber's bonded. Can it cause a knocking noise? No, I don't think it can. I think the knocking noise may well have been coming from the bearing, a bit of movement in the bearing. Can we replace just the bearing? I don't think you can. Looking at this, it looks to me like the bearing is sort of pressed in and then the rubber's moulded around it. Obviously I'll have a go at taking this one apart later on, and before I chuck it in the bin, to see if it is possible. And then I'll know for next time, because, you know, hey, it's the bearing that seems to go, and it's pretty exposed. There's nothing to stop the dirt and stuff getting in there, which is really bad, isn't it? Bad design, Toyota. Not good. Okay, I did get a new top plate. They gave me this for free. It was obviously spare. The reason for that is, on here you've got a couple of flats on that top plate there, and they have to line up with the flats on top of the piston rod. And if I drop that one in place, you'll see what I mean. If it can actually fit, they are quite a tight fit. Yeah, that one's not great. Okay, well anyway, those two flats have to line up with the flats on here. And, you know, this is a bit of a sports car. People like to take them apart at home, and sometimes they forget to line those flats up. They just buzz up the nut, and it chews the hell out of the inside of there. So, ha! There you go. Can you see on here? There's a couple of silver marks. There's one there and one opposite. And that tells me that at some point in the past, somebody has had a go at tightening this up, and they've not aligned it properly, and it's damaged it slightly. Not a great deal, a little bit. Okay. So do we use the new one? Does it warrant a swap? Yes. Yes, it really, really does. Because it's even worse than I thought, actually. It's actually taken away the flat surface on here and there. So this should be a straight line across there, and it's munched a great bit out of there, and it's munched a bit out of there, and it's squashed it down onto there. So this plate wouldn't have been sat flat on the piston rod. It might have even been rocking around a little bit, and that could have been the knock. Yeah. So we'll change that. Cool. Dead chuffed they gave me a new one. Right, so we're going to swap the rubber across. So I'm going to stick that back on there for now. I can go back. Right, one rubber to change. Now, obviously with these rubbers, you can see where the spring finishes. Quite often they're shaped. This one doesn't seem as if it's all that shaped, but I want to put it basically in the same position as the other one, because you'll see that there's a bit of a rise on there. This isn't flat. So, if we put the high point up there like that, and you look at the flats in there, so we'll put those so the flats are parallel. That looks pretty good. Okay, and now we can extract the rubber, which is pretty easy, and we can lay that in there. And then there's no issues. One more thing we have left to do, and that's to transfer our white line. So if we pop that on top, like that, line up these little lugs, and then look for our little white line. There we are, look. So there's the white line. We'll just transfer that across onto there, onto the new one. And hey presto, everything should line up, he says with total confidence. Woohoo! Okay, so we found a couple of problems. The bearing was really, really bad. Had a bit of play in it, that would cause a knock. We found a problem with the top plate and where it keys into on these flats onto the piston rod. Maybe it was rocking around a bit. That would also cause a knock. Okay, now for the bomb. Let's put the bomb back in place. Now the pigtail of the spring, that's the end here, has to line up with the notch on the base plate. That's pretty obvious. Okay. Yep, that's all good. And then make sure your piston rod's all the way up. You'll thank me later. And to hold it up, you can always put your bump stop down there, that helps. And now we can get the top plate, find the mark, which we've got here, and we've got the white mark on the top plate, and we can lay that down on there. Now obviously I've been moving the piston rod up and down, so we're going to have to rotate the piston rod to get those flats to line up as well. So where are we with that? I think actually we need to just give that a little bit of a file out. It just seems a little bit tight. There we go. I'm just going to give this a bit of a clean out. Okay, right, let's give this a go. Hopefully it's going to line up. So if we do the flats up and down, there we go. We can always turn it around later so it matches up on the marks. Oh, that's a lot better. Good job, Mr. Young. Right, torch. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I've got a way to go to the flats yet. And we're already on the spring. Okay, I think we're going to need to compress that spring a bit more. Not easy when it's not bolted in place. I think actually we're going the wrong way. Yes, we are. Easy done. see how we are now. And again, just make sure that that piston rod's all the way up, otherwise you're fighting a losing battle if it's not. Right, torchy. Okay. It is really, really important that you get this right. I think without there. Copper hammer, very important. Okay, looks good. Now, we've also got to line up the white lines. Oh, go back with her. Okay, there we go. So we must rotate that around to there. I don't think the rubber's actually any different anyway around there. That doesn't matter too much. Right. Now for the new top mount. Let's stick a bit of lubricant in that bearing. There we go. And that just goes in any place. Doesn't matter because it spins on the bearing. And we can put the nut back on. Now, in an ideal world, that should be a new nylock. And when you buy new struts, you get new nylocks. So, yeah, I don't have one, and it's a pretty weird thread and a strange size. Now, until that nut's in place, just be careful because the whole thing can still, you know, jump off these spring compressors. Now, I am going to use the rattle gun to tighten it up, but we're not there yet. Now, it's okay because the piston rod's now turning with the top plate. Yes, the top plate's in the wrong position, and we'll just keep going around with it until it's back to where it should be. Let's take it back the other way, actually. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So now we've got the marks lined up again. All we need to do is lat it up with the rattle gun now. So that's a lot better than the old one. It's not perfect by any means, but there's definitely no play in it. Okay, now finally, again, line everything up. Most annoying. There we are, perfect. Okay, so now we can release, finally, the spring compressors, making sure that the spring's in the correct position and all the lines mark up, all the marks line up. Okay. Man, they work a lot better with some CRC on them. Perfect. Okay. Now you can just push that bump stop up to the top. That's where it lives. It probably won't stay there for very long. And that can now go back in the car. Yeah, so we've checked the strut. We know that the operation's okay. The plunger action, the piston rod action, is continuous all the way throughout its entire travel, which is an indication that the shock absorbing part of the strut hasn't lost any oil. If it's lost some oil, there won't be enough oil to provide that damping effect throughout the whole travel of that piston down the tube. And we've got even movement up and down. There's no side to side movement on the bush. The bush is good. Yes, it looked damp, but that was just water. There's no oil residue as such, really. Yes, there was a little tiny bit on the piston rod itself. Not too worried about that. They do leak a little tiny bit anyway, but not a lot. You know, a little tiny bit, that's acceptable. So now we can put this back in the vehicle. I'm not going to bother putting the caliper back on because I've got to do the brakes tomorrow. And that's about it. So let's go refit this strut back to the front left-hand corner of that MR2. Now, on the actual top bush, you've got, on the bearing, a notch. And the notch goes to the rear here. Okay, and then on the actual top plate, we've got the words out and an arrow. So that has to come to the outside of the vehicle. There we go. Right. Oh, so easy. We'll just put those nuts on loosely for now. We'll come back later on and give them a tweak. Super job. Okay, so first job really is to get the two main bolts in on the bottom of the strut. Now, don't forget it's nuts to the front, and of course, oh crap, a little bit of thread lock. There we go, that'll do. Now on this particular vehicle, both the two bolts are identical, and getting the whole thing lined up initially is not the easiest. Yeah, because you sort of, there we go. Excellent. Right, pop that nut on there, look. It's always good to give things a bit of a clean. Makes it a lot easier, a lot cleaner when you're putting the whole thing back together. Right, so a bit more thread lock then. You don't need heaps, you know. You can actually end up putting too much on there. Great stuff. Okay, rattle gun time. Just before I do this up, the reason why you should get a wheel alignment done again after you've done this job is because of that movement there. That affects the camber of the wheel. So if it was in that position, you'd have more camber, and that position less camber. Now, as it happens on this particular car, there isn't that much movement. It's probably going to affect the camber by maybe 1 or 2 degrees. Super job. All we need now is a big power bar. Now, there will be a torque setting for these, and if I can find it, I'll put it on the screen for you. If I can't, then you'll have to go for FT. There we go. Okay, now what's next? Well, we've got the anti-roll bar link, that can go in. And that down there like that. There we go. Put it in the hole, bring it back. And at some point, we'll go through the hole. There we are. Perfect. Okay. So the nut, putting it on from the back so you can see what's going on. Nut goes on there. and that was a 14. Okay, we're going to try and hold it still. Remember, it turned on when we took it apart. Excellent. Okay, now don't forget, on this side you've got that flexi pipe. It needs to go back through there to that clip, that bracket. There we go. Pull that through, and it should align. There we go. Look, in that. There we go. Perfect. And now we'll fit the E-clip. So the E-clip goes in there like that. Now to put them back in is pretty easy. Just give them a tap. Done. Now all that's left to do now is tighten up these 4 nuts on top of the strut. Now again, there will be a torque setting for these, and if I can find it, I'll put it on the video for you. Probably around about, well, about probably about 30 newton meters, I would say, but I could be wrong. Probably am. Let's see what the manual has to say. Perfect. Okay, well, I'm not going to bother refitting the caliper because I've got to put new brake pads in tomorrow. So I'll bleed the caliper up then. And that's the only thing that we've not put back on the vehicle from doing this job. So let's head back into the workshops and have a little talk about it. Okay, so not a difficult job. You do need to jack the vehicle up. You do need to put on an axle stand, obviously for safety reasons. And you'll need some tools. What did I use? 17mm spanner, 14mm spanner, 40mm single hex socket, ratchet extension bar, power bar, 19mm socket, and a couple of spring compressors. You're going to need some of these. They're probably these are about $40 New Zealand, so they're not expensive. Plenty of different types out there. Copper hammer, you know, all your basic stuff. The only specialist tools that I used were the 2 spring compressors. So you can do this. You really can, but you need to follow procedure, and don't forget to get one of those paint pens. They're really, really useful for marking stuff up. And then there's no ambiguity. You know where things go. That's important. And I mean, let's face it, Toyota have helped you along the way. It does say somewhere on here, if I can find it, it does say on the top plate the words out, and it has an arrow. That arrow just there, look. So that points outwards across the vehicle. So with it being the left strut, it points off to the left hand side of the vehicle, to the curb basically. Look out when you're inspecting it for damage to these little flats here. That's very, very common when people that don't know what they're doing rebuild these struts and mess around with them, trying to make the cars lower or higher or do whatever they do to them. And the other problem that we found was, of course, the bearing. The bush itself, it looks pretty good. It looks just about as good as the one that I've just fitted. So time will tell whether there's any more knocks from that corner. It has had a wheel bearing. That was one of the contributing factors. There was lots of strange noises from that corner. So we'll have to wait and see. Bit of a road test. But if you need to remove a strut from the front of an MR2, or pretty much any front-wheel drive car, that procedure is the way to do it. And if you need to take the spring off, or you're going to lower the vehicle, put different springs on, that, again, this video covers how to compress those springs in order to undo that top nut on the piston rod safely. Yes, we've all seen the zip tie answer. No, it's not a good idea. I don't recommend that at all. It's basically stupid, in my opinion. For this, you're going to use about $40 of zip ties when you can go out and buy the right tools, and then you've got them forever. Simple. So there you go. I hope you found that video helpful and no doubt interesting. Okay, so if you've got any questions or comments on the video, and feel free, just type away. Yep, I can hear you typing right now. Okay, type away and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, you found the whole thing helpful and interesting, and you want to watch some more Andy Mechanic, subscribe. Click the notifications, that's the little gear symbol as well. Turn on notifications, and that way you'll know when new videos get uploaded, so you can watch some more Andy Mechanic. Who knows? Yeah, so there you go. You've been watching my YouTube channel, and well, until next time. Cheers, guys. Over and out.